And this is how Allah has created women, nurturing humanity's feelings and emotions. The major sin, Ayatollah Khomeini says, of materialistic civilizations is weakening or belittling or sometimes forgetting this role, that of nurturing and educating society towards its perfection. Wherever there is weakness or suppression of the family, it's because such a role has been undermined. Wherever there is inattentiveness to this art of the mother and art of nurturing children in their lapse of love and compassion, it's because there exists inattentiveness to their role. This is the West's major crime. And part of the crime is this, that they execute this inattentiveness and guise it or conceal it with the label of protection of women's rights. But this is no protection. This is betrayal to the woman and a betrayal to humanity. And this can easily be seen today when countries like Saudi Arabia have been given a United Nations role for protection of women's rights. This fits in very well with the Western understanding of the woman. And how can a government who don't uphold the values of a woman themselves, how can they be supporters of women's rights themselves? Also, in the West, when you see the advocation or the facilitation of women putting their children into nurseries and working soon after giving birth, this may on the outside look as if it's strengthening the woman or giving her certain rights to work and so on and so forth. But this is crumbling society. This is belittling society, and it's distancing the woman from one of her fundamental manifestations of Allah, which is her rububiyyah, her nurturing capacity. At the end of the day, one of the most significant aspects of nurturing can apply as a teacher, as a doctor, but one of the most significant manifestations is for their own child. And to be paved the way to easily put the child in nursery, for the woman to go and work, this goes against this nurturing capacity of the woman. And leaving one's child under the, in quotes, love and compassion of another woman, that it can't be really compared to what the mother herself can give. So here it's very easy to understand that when you look at the identity of the woman, and identity of the man and the woman is to succeed Allah. They are Khalifatullah. And succeeding Allah in His attributes of perfection. And there are certain attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the woman can manifest much more than the man, and therefore these attributes which she innately has the capacity to manifest much more, she has to base her lifestyle on these attributes. So any society which turns a blind eye to this phenomenon, that society is not really moving towards perfection. It's going the wrong direction. So once you don't allow the woman to reach her potential, and that is in those certain attributes of perfection, such as nurturing her rahmaniyah and so on and so forth, that's the beginning of society's wretchedness. It's the beginning of the end, so to speak. Ayatollah Khomeini elsewhere has said that there are two major oppressions against the woman. He says, in my opinion, the biggest betrayal against women, the worst insult, and the most oppressive act against them is that of introducing them as a means and a vehicle for others' benefit, meaning for man's benefit or men's benefit. This is prevalent today in the West, and others, meaning in the East, are emulating this. They have endeavored hard to make this firmly ingrained within their culture, where the woman is being adorned, beautified and commodified. There's no retaliation from society in the West, but were there to be a movement of absence of such traits, where the woman isn't adorned or commodified in society, there would arise a backlash against it. And this illustrates that there's a political drive behind such a culture. So, for example, in many countries, the woman is beautified and seen as a commodity for the benefit of be it the media, for corporations or other things. And you just have to look at the advertisements or how a woman wants to look for a job compared to when a man wants to look for a job. And so he says this is the worst insult, because they're not looked at and ends in themselves as an independent person trying to attain to perfection. They're seen as a vehicle for other people's benefit. Then Ayatollah Khomeini continues, you can see today that the West has gradually, openly showed its antagonism against the hijab. They label their discontent by stating hijab is a religious movement and we don't want such symbols in a secular state. In my opinion, this is a lie, Ayatollah Khomeini says. It's not about religion. Their main driving force is that of suppressing the woman. And the hijab goes against such a drive. Even if hijab had no religious or faith-related links, they would show their antagonism against it. So look, this is Ayatollah Khomeini, he's going beyond religion even. He's not making it a religious affair primarily. He's saying it all goes against how they view women. That's why they're against the hijab. They look at the woman in a particular light, for a particular benefit, with a particular objective. Anything which goes against that, they will go against. And since the hijab goes against this political drive of theirs, that's why they are against the hijab. It's not about Islam then. It's about the woman herself, irrespective of what religion she is, her haqq, her rights being trampled on. They want to use her as a means to their satiation, but the woman has to be independent from this. So this is a very delicate point. Not many people have looked at it in this light, the light of it meta-religion, outside religion. And therefore, if the hijab, for example, was on a par with their political objectives, they wouldn't have gone against it. They go against it because it goes against their political objectives. And their political objective isn't against Islam. Why don't they attack many forms of Islam which don't speak about hijab or don't treat it as seriously? Many denominations have that. But this, when the hijab is strictly abided by, it goes against what they want to materialize in their societies. Another great oppression is in regards to the woman's role in the family unit. Islam's stance is very clear. Al-mar'atu sayyidatu baytaha. This is a prophetic saying where the woman is the master of her house. Lots of similar maxims have been relayed by the successors of the Holy Prophet. Sayings such as Al-mar'atu rayhana laysat biqahramana, that the woman is a flower, not a qahraman. And then Ayatollah Khomeini says qahraman in Arabic means, because in Farsi it has another meaning, but the Arabic meaning is one who is working hard with heavy chores or heavy activity. That's not on a par with the essence of the woman, the identity of the woman. One of Allah's attributes is al-qawi. Okay, but here men manifest this attribute more than women. And this isn't an Islamic thing, even anthropologically. When you go to different tribes and people, different civilizations, from the Amazon to Africa to Australia, here you see that all these are innate truths. Even tribes which have had no access to Islam, they do associate certain attributes of perfection more with the man than the woman, and vice versa. Okay, and there were a few statements, and inshallah I have more statements to translate for future sessions. Two general principles that we have extrapolated from the Holy Quran also, which we need to bear in mind, because from these principles a lot of even sharia rulings are extrapolated. One is the law of pairs, and this law of pairs has been extrapolated from the Quran, and I read a number of verses which speaks about it. And the law of pairs is suggesting that survival, be it materialistic or spiritual survival, can only happen through pairing. And this pairing, the scholars have used it and extended its use and have permeated it into areas of the sharia. For example, with marriage, when you want to find a spouse, they say you have to find your kuf, your equivalent. And this finding your equivalent, for this pairing to actualize, is they have protocols given on what to look for, why you have to look for them, and when pairing, when does it become maximum. That we'll speak another time. But for the survival, be it of physical survival or spiritual survival, in many verses of the Quran, this idea of pairing has been mentioned. So in relation to Noah's Ark, when they were asked to bring on board from the animals a pair of every kind, in chapter 11 of the Holy Quran, ihmil fiha min kulli zawjayn ithnayn. So from every pair, a pair from each kind of animal that existed at the time, bring them. And there were also, some traditions speak of them being 80 believers, men and women also, on the ark, but showing that with pairing, be it of the human kind or even with the animal kind, it's important for at least the physical survival of life in general. But this can also be extended to spiritual survival. We don't have to limit things or the narratives of the Quran only to the physical aspect. Even the spiritual survival of society, of the man and the woman, this pairing has to happen. And pairing qualifies when they are of opposite sexes. If there are, let's say, two of the same sex, they don't call that pairing. Even logicians don't call that pairing. We can't play around with the words. Pairing has a set meaning. Even in the non-Quranic context, when you have a woman and a woman or a man and a man, pairing doesn't qualify here. And there are reasons why a woman and a woman and a man can't lead to that spiritual survival of society. In other verses of the Quran it says, وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا الزَّوْجَيْنِ. خَلَقْنَا الزَّوْجَيْنِ means that from everything we've created them in pairs. So everything, there's a pair of them. Some of them we know it grows from earth, some of them amongst ourselves humans, and then the Quran says there's some things that you haven't appreciated what it means that they have also pairs. Now maybe 1,000 years ago they didn't know that bacteria are in pairs too. We know it today, but maybe in another 1,000 years there are things that they will come up with that we don't know today, but they will say this thing, this creature, they also have pairs. So you see the whole cosmos, it's based on pairing. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها, that immaculate is Allah who's created pairs, everything in pairs. مما تنبت الأرض, from that which the earth grows, like plants for example. ومن أنفسهم, and like yourselves, humans. ومما لا يعلمون, and things that you don't know. So these two principles here, well, this one principle, this has many connotations, and the sharia also, many of the protocols in the sharia is based on this. Another law that has been extrapolated from the Quran is the law of uniformity. And here, I'll go through the verses and it will become apparent what is meant. That in one verse of the Holy Quran it reads, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, that we've created humans in the best form. So here, this talk of humans, including men and women are meant. If you're a human, you're created in the best form. Your potential is high. No other creature has been created. Many creatures have different potentials and objectives, but you've been created in the best form. The potential you have is much higher than what other creatures have. So here, the form, be you male or female, you're equal here in having that potential to reach your goal. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, verily we have dignified Bani Adam, the descendants of Adam alayhi salam, meaning everyone. Here, again, it includes men and women. So even the dignity granted, it's given to both men and women. You can't say one is higher than the other. So in relation to the best form, it's uniform between man and woman. In relation to the dignity they have, it's equal, uniform between men and women. Ya ayyuhan nas, ittaqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahida wa khalaqa minha zawjaha. That, O people, have taqwa before your Lord, who's created you from a single substance and created your spouse from the same substance. So even one's origins are uniform. And the logic of this verse goes against certain traditions that we may have, where it says Adam was created from the clay, but Eve was created from the rib of Adam. Those kind of traditions, its superficial meaning goes against the logic of the Quran. And in these cases, we don't have to discard the hadith, we just have to look at the batini meaning, and if there's a batini meaning associated with it. لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى, that for humans, they are that which they endeavor towards. But again, it's humans, male or female. يَا أَيُّهَا الْإِنسَانِ إِنَّكَ كَادِحٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ كَدْحًا فَمُلَاقِيهِ. That again, O humans, verily you're striving thoroughly towards your Lord, and you'll meet Him. Again, it's addressing humans. You see, the uniformity between man and woman here, there's no demarcating feature that delineates one of them being higher than the other. They're both from the same origin, with the same form, with the same objective, which is perfection, and they have the same potential. Sometimes someone like Lady Maryam maybe we have a higher status than most of the prophets, for example. So, spirituality-wise, perfection-wise, no one is higher than the other. Or man amila saliha, one who does righteous actions, min dhakarin o untha, be you male or female. Then the verse continues, we'll give them hayatun tayyiba, the prosperous spiritual life. And there are many other traditions. There are traditions like saying that be the mu'mineen, the mu'minat, the sadiqeen, the sadiqat, qaniteen, qanitat. Look, all of them, when it comes to attributes of perfection, the Quran is speaking to both, and both have this capacity. So here, the route to perfection is equal in both. The soul's route to perfection, what the soul can manifest, both man and woman equally, uniformly can reach their goal. But yes, there's one difference here, and that's the biological constitution. That's different in men and women. And here, with these differences, the Sharia has closely scrutinized the differences that exist. When it comes to spiritual states of perfection, no, they both have the same root, the same potential to attain them. But at the end of the day, one is a woman, one is a man. And very naturally, there are differences amongst them. One of them has a womb, one of them doesn't have a womb. We believe in the unity of body and soul. The soul is generating the body, moment to moment. It's one reality, the soul and the physical body. The soul is just the immaterial dimension. The body is the physical dimension, but it's one reality. Moment to moment, the soul is generating the body. So now we have a soul which is generating a womb. Then we have another soul of men, which isn't generating a womb. But because of this unity between body and soul, one can appreciate the differences here. That soul which is generating a womb, you would only expect that that soul's potential for rububiyyah is more. For nurturing, the potential is more here. For showing mercy, the potential is more. Because they have a womb. Now, even if they never become a mother, the potential is there because they've generated this womb. Okay, they may not be a mother, but they can nurture their patients, their clients, their students, and so on and so forth. But the man is also a manifestation of Allah's rububiyyah, but not as much. And the Sharia has taken this into consideration. And inshallah we'll discuss more of those over time, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala tahirin. If there are any questions at this stage, please feel free. Yes. Yes, yes.
You mentioned how a woman should build a lifestyle based on these attributes. Does that mean that it should be her priority over commitments outside of her home? Because sometimes our society expects a mother, especially of young children, to be able to still fulfill social responsibilities, or, for example, in the family, there may be pressure for her to continue
Yes, so the underlying criterion is, after establishing that her nurturing capacity, her other attributes are, for example, her rahmaniyya, she manifests this much more. Or another is her jamal, for example, and so on and so forth. If, now, society has many expectations, that doesn't have to be bad or good, it depends on society. But the duty bounds underlying criterion is these things which society expect from me, or my family expect from me. Were I to do them, because they're halal at the end of the day, we're assuming that, were I to do them, would that compromise my nurturing capacity or my rahmaniyya capacity? Now here women are different. For one woman, they may say, yes, most definitely, I can't do it. You may find one sister who says, no, I can do both. So the underlying criteria is this, but the duty bound has to decide. So if one woman decides to, let's say, go to work 9 to 5, it's very heavy hours to work. And it may seem for us that they're compromising their nurturing capacity. Okay? But we have to, maybe they've evaluated it and they don't see it as compromising. So we don't enter the particularities, we just give the criteria. Then the woman, the sister, has to now evaluate for herself, and she has to be honest with herself. So it's everyone to themselves. It's very possible that out of every 10 sisters, you get 10 different lifestyles here, because it depends on the sister. It would be suspicious if 10 sisters all have exactly the same, because the 10 sisters aren't exactly alike, they're different. But as long as her identity isn't compromised, and that means her nurturing capacity, her rahmaniyya capacity, and jamal and other attributes that women manifest more, yes. But experience has shown that when a woman works from, I don't want to generalize, when she works heavy hours like 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, when she comes back home, it's going to be very difficult to manage these attributes, but it's not impossible. Yes, we've had many good examples in Iran, and they've even presented these certain women in Iran who brought up their children, participated in the war early in the revolution, and they became specialists in certain fields. Yes, so it is possible. Everyone has to evaluate themselves. Yes, so when you want to base your lifestyle on this criterion, this is what is meant, that when you see a given job or a commitment or a social role, before wanting to enter it, see how does it affect, And even if one doesn't have children, they still have, the same applies. They would say, if I go into this role, I know myself most. If I take this job or this social role, let's say a volunteering effort that the mosque is asking sisters to do, any social kind of task, the same procedure applies. That will it compromise these attributes or not? Sometimes there may be a social role that you go and choose because you want to enhance those attributes. You see, for example, you don't find them in home. It's possible, and you go out and find them. And that's why we'll speak about it. Islam doesn't have any limitations for women and their role in society. Yes. Sorry.
So we said, according to the Quran, women and men have equal potential to
Yeah.
attain spiritual perfection.
Yes.
But sometimes you get these arguments that there are certain laws in the sharia
Yes. I've given many speeches on this before. Sometimes when I speak to a new community, I kind of sometimes assume that maybe they've listened to it, so I try to avoid repetition to the best of my capacity. But this, I have a lecture series on this. These points that you mention, like the witnessing or inheritance, or there was one other example you gave, mujtahid, and I think one other thing you said, all these, well, the mujtahid, everyone accepts you can be a mujtahid. That's not an issue, and we'll speak more about that. No one says a woman can't be a mujtahid, and we've had many mujtahids in time. It's just that following them as a marja, there are differences of opinion. Not that it's not one voice. And women can be mujtahids, that's a definite. Being a mujtahid is an academic qualification. You can't say a woman can't be a mujtahid, that doesn't make sense. And actually a woman can even be stronger in knowledge than a man. But can they be a religious authority for women and men? For them to follow them? Some say yes, some say no, some are in between. Some say they can be marriages for women, they can't be marriages for men. Some say they can be marriages for both, if X, Y and Z are abided by. This X and Y and Z is important, because that woman who's a marriager, do they have a husband or not? Then as a position as a marriager, will there be a conflict of interest with the husband? There shouldn't be any conflict. A marriage is a big position. And if the woman is a marriager, according to those who accept it, the conflict has to be solved first. Because you can't if she's the marriager, she can't depend on the husband's rights now. That will cause a lot of problems. So some say yes, some say no, some say if X, Y and Z conditions are abided by. But the other points you are mentioning, which are mainly sharia points, these all go back to the identity of the woman. So when we say the woman manifests attributes of rububiyyah or attributes of rahmaniyah more than the man, because of this, Islam says, look, there are certain things here we're going to say in the sharia, and we say them so that this identity of the woman isn't compromised. We don't want, with one woman going to the court, with every civil or criminal case. If they want, they can go, but it's not wajib. We get two, because if one of them goes in a case which is a difficult case, going to a court, the nature of the place, giving evidence, facing the opponent and so on and so forth, this goes against, it can hamper or compromise the woman's rububiyyah. She wants to bear children. Putting her in situations which are not very healthy, when she wants to bear a children, that has an effect on the child. Not that the woman her witnessing is of no value or half the value of a man. That can't be the case because of the Quranic law of uniformity which we mentioned. It has to, so you have to see, why is the Quran saying this? And in general, in the Sharia, when you look at the duties of the woman, the responsibilities that the Sharia has made wajib, they're very few. And then you have to ask yourself, why? Why are the wajib duties of the woman before the husband, why are they only one or two of them? But the husband has 100. All this goes back to the woman's identity not being compromised, and the husband's duties too, is so that his identity be enhanced. So that's a very brief answer, but if you go to the series on an Irfani perspective of women, there were 4 lectures. The question of mujtahids, judges and other Sharia dilemmas like inheritance and witnessing, I have gone into detail there, yes. Yes.
isolate our ideology as oppressive to
Yes.
yeah, it's very much a very common
Yes, and as Ayatollah Khomeini said, it's under the guise of protecting women's rights, but it's another agenda that they have. Yes, yes, sure.
As a mother of sons, many sons, I'm constantly portraying my feminine side as recommended or my media side. Is there like a danger? I don't know the right word, but that my sons will become more feminine because they're only seeing that feminine side, or more than they see their father portray,
Yes. Here again, I've spoken quite a lot on nurturing the child's sexual identity, and you can find them online. Or I have the slides if you wanted them. But yes, when you look at the ahadith, there's a whole list of ahadith which say after 2 years of age, the mother shouldn't be bathing the son. It's not haram if they do, these are just recommendations, it's mustahab. And a whole other list of protocols given, and it starts after 2. And then the more it approaches 6 or 7, it gets more and more emphasized. And there, yes, this, what you've mentioned is a danger. And there are 2 things here. So you would have to, the feminine side of yours, for your husband you manifest. That's a must. And you have to do that. That's part of your identity. If one doesn't manifest her jamal in front of the husband, and that's going to cause problems in itself. One would be more male-like on the batini side. So that you have to do. But it shouldn't be done too much in front of the children. But to some degree it's okay, but there are limits. But this idea of the man not being present, and this is a Western concept for the man working 9 to 6. In Islam we don't have such hours given. Work is work and it's important. But a whole 9 hours not seeing their son, if it's a man, that's going to cause difficulties in itself. Because in the ahadith it says, when you want to find a toy for your son or for your daughter, or you want to do a certain activity for your son or your daughter, if they are sons, the toy, the activity should be more masculine. This is to do with the nurturing of the boy with his masculine innate nature, and also with the sister, more feminine things, activities and toys. And then it says that the boy should predominantly be under the auspices of the man, and the girl under the auspices of the mother, predominantly, not wholly. And this is a threat. Now, let's say if the man really isn't present in that son's life, a father figure of some sort has to compensate, but they'll never compensate. It's like taking your child to nursery. It won't compensate that absence of the mother, for example, or the compassion the mother can give. So yes, all these have been alluded to, all these kind of very minute details in the ahadith, and it starts from 2 onwards. And this shows that Islam has a protocol for nurturing the sexual identity of the child. And yes, one has to try and minimize the repercussions, because the repercussions can be serious. Because gender is moldable. One sex is one sex, you're male or female. Sex is a function of one's anatomy. But gender is a function of one's psychology now. That can be molded from birth, well, especially from 2 years of age onwards. That can be molded. And all these ahadith that we have, the scholars say it's in line of this purpose, to assign or to nurture that sexual identity of the boy or the girl. So yeah, it's an important point. It's good to have appreciated it, yes. Okay, I'll stop there. Inshallah, see you tomorrow, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala